So
I welcome. Here,
yep.
I just introduce it. It's Wednesday, May 3rd, and we're having a meeting with William Stein about his Jupyter Notebook rewrite and the new Jupyter Notebook rewrite and the SageMathCloud.
Right. So basically, I spent the last 2.5 months working on implementing the, I guess, classical Jupyter client, trying to follow the user interface and functionality very, very closely, but in the context of SageMathCloud, and trying to incorporate better kind of integration with the system that we already have. We're using some of the functionality we have. And the main motivation is wanting RealTime Sync to work really well, because it was kind of hacked in on top of the existing Jupyter Notebook in the live version of SageMathCloud, and sometimes we'd run into issues. So we wanted something that was more robust for real-time collaboration. And it's not released yet, but the plan is to release it this weekend. And it's not done yet, there's still a couple of days before the weekend, but it's getting pretty close to being done. So I thought it would be useful to get some feedback by people that have used the Jupyter Notebook a lot. So I'll show you a really quick demo. It should look very familiar, even though it's re-implementation. And as I mentioned, you can try it out yourself by doing kind of the same thing. So I'll click the screen share button, which I'm now sharing. What am I sharing? Okay. I haven't used this before. Am I properly sharing my browser window, or?
Yes, you're sharing your whole desktop.
You're sharing your entire desktop.
Okay. I don't want to do that. I want to share the browser window, share entire screen, share application. I see.
So Google Chrome.
Google Chrome, got it. Okay, now I see how to do this. Okay, perfect. So now you can see just my browser.
That's right.
And I posted a link right here. What?
Your browser is on a blue background.
Due to the top shadow.
Yeah. I think it's just not as big as your screen is.
Okay, I'll try to enlarge it. How's that? Better?
Great. Yep.
Okay,
great.
So there's a link right here in the chat room. If you go to that link, then you can create a project. And in that project, you can click New and then Jupyter Notebook, and you'll get a Jupyter Notebook, which the kernel that you get will depend on what you've done in the past. I have the Sage 7.6 kernel, which sadly is going to take a while to start up because Sage can take a long time to start. But the design is meant to look familiar. So there's the same menus across the top: File, Edit, View, Insert, Cell, Kernel, and Help. And the toolbar looks pretty similar. I got rid of the, I guess, round button for restarting the kernel, because you probably don't need to restart the kernel a lot. It looks exactly like our redo button. So if you do like A equals and then do undo, and then you go up here and click redo, then it's sort of the same thing. But there's still kernel, restart kernel right here. There are some other buttons I added. So I didn't add very much, but I added resize buttons for the font. So it's easier when you're doing demos. This toolbar is the same. This is the same. And there's a save and a very, very clear save button and a time travel button. The time travel button takes, yes?
How and when do you want feedback?
How annoying do I want feedback?
How and when?
Oh, how and when?
Do you want feedback like stop right now and I tell you, for example, this is going to be different and it's going to break user muscle memory, or do I just take notes and send you everything at the end?
Interrupt me and provide immediate feedback. Now. Whoa! I got feedback via audio. Echoing feedback. That's not what I want. That's not the kind of feedback I want. But yeah, just tell me right now.
Okay. I'm not able to turn up my audio.
I can't mute myself and have the sound as well.
Let me.
How about feedback in the chat session? SMC chat.
I don't have it.
Yeah. We're trying to have everyone put headphones on.
Okay, yeah. By the way, Kyle, I just added your account to this demo project. So you should be able to open the worksheet that I'm using. So you can see there's Kyle typing.
Did you hear Matthias's question?
I did not.
He wanted to know how and when you wanted feedback. Should he just interrupt you and give you feedback, or do you want him to take notes?
I want him to interrupt me and provide feedback.
One thing is that restart and interrupt are double pressed because on SageMathCloud it's only one press of 0 and one press of I to restart and interrupt.
Oh,
and
sorry. Well, so I have a list of about 7 things on my to-do list that are not done yet, which I plan to do this week, and they explicitly include exactly that. So okay. I do 100% plan to implement the double press keyboard shortcuts exactly as in Jupyter. I wrote all the keyboard shortcut stuff while I was on an airplane flight, and it landed, and I just stopped midstream. And the double press I hadn't done yet because it's kind of a little different than anything I've done before. But I genuinely don't want to break muscle memory, stuff like that.
I will, for a small thing like that, I will take notes and I can send you everything. Sure. If there is really big things that need to be discussed, I can interrupt.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy with being interrupted. I mean, and I'm not going to just go on forever. I just, okay, so what else to show you? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we've done. Like, I really mean this to be feature complete with respect to the normal standard Jupyter, not with respect to all extensions, of course. There are a few things we have that do overlap with existing extensions. For example, code folding. So if you do code folding is not on here, but if I go to my account settings, oh, actually it is on by default. So you can see that there's code folding. That's enabled or disabled in account settings in SMC. So see, there's code folding right there. If I uncheck that and then I go back over here, code folding is now disabled for me. Line numbers, similarly, there's a system-wide line number thing, but I decided since that's so very explicit in the menu system for Jupyter that you do it exactly like in the normal Jupyter. So there's just toggling line numbers. There's also themes. So if you go over here and select, for example, solarized light, then all of your cells at least will use solarized light, like this. And there's also key bindings. So for example, Vim key bindings. So I changed to Vim, and now when I go over to the editor, for me it's Vim. I mean, you can't tell, but it's Vim. And there's some thought that went into, for example, what to do at the bottom mode line. Since the CodeMirror Vim, the bottom mode line like covers the bottom line of what you're editing, which is really bad in a one-line thing. So it adds in an extra line at the bottom, which clearly looks funny with the solarized theme. But if you're using most other themes, it looks fine. So let me just switch back to the default theme. there's always funny issues with various code names. But if I go right here, the mode line is put at the bottom, and it will properly do things like if you do Control W, it does actually save, etc. And what I did was, when you're in write mode, if you hit escape once, it switches to Vim edit, and then if you hit escape again, it switches to the normal Jupyter command mode. So, I mean, just as I'm showing you random things, one thing when Hal, the other person from SageMath who's on the video chat, when he was testing, he noticed that when the cursor is very close to the top and you go up, often the cursor, like the thing doesn't scroll. It's some issue with CodeMirror where when you're using vertical auto or height auto, it doesn't necessarily scroll when your cursor goes up above, but it does now. I had to put in some extra hack. And I noticed when I was testing that Jupyter also has the same problem. So I reported that in the Jupyter issue tracker and gave a link to at least how I fixed that.
Do you handle up and down at boundary of cells? Like if you're at the top of a cell at the first character and you press up, you should probably move the cursor to previous cell.
I just realized that I definitely have not implemented that. Maybe I just forgot. Right now, it just gets stuck right there. What does Jupyter do? Does it move to the previous cell?
So when it's at the top line, if you're not at the first character, it moves you first at the beginning of the line. And then when you're at the top of the cell and at the beginning of the line, up moves you to the previous cell.
Okay, then I missed that, and I will add that to my to-do list because that will, yeah, I just completely forgot about that. I remember always worrying about similar things with SageMB where you're moving between cells. I just forgot about that. So up at top of cell in certain cases moves to previous cell, etc. Okay.
And item and same thing for bottom, of course.
Yeah. Make that clear. Just other things. So, go ahead.
I was saying, can you talk briefly about the execution semantics that you added? Things like verification that thing is executing and the information you're putting in the top right.
Okay, I'll do that. Let's see. So I'll make a new cells. So in the top right, when the kernel's starting, it shows a broken circle, and it spins during startup. And then when it's done starting, it's a solid circle. And again, the stupid Sage kernel takes forever to start. Maybe I'll just switch to a different kernel, like the Anaconda Python 3 kernel. That just starts up much more quickly.
Alt-Enter inserts a cell below, but doesn't select the cell below. I think it's a different behavior than the normal.
Okay, and that would be a mistake.
I believe.
Okay, so it's supposed to. I did attempt to get the Alt-Enter, Control-Enter, and Shift-Enter behavior to exactly match Jupyter by just playing with it, but I could have messed up after implementing it or changed something else that messed it up.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's just what I see. I will just report it.
Okay, cool. So basically, when it's starting up, I put some tooltip in the upper right over the kind of mode thing that tells you, that whether the backend is there and whether the kernel's idle or running. So, for example, if I do import time.sleep 10. Now the kernel is busy. So when you mouse over, it says kernel is busy. Also, instead of an asterisk, which it's a web browser, so you can use icons. Actually, I think Kyle suggested an icon. I just used exactly the same icon, the solid dot that you use in the upper right, instead of the asterisk. It just seems more. It just makes more sense to me to use the exact same indicator in both places, as you can see right here. And then another indication of what's happening is when you start running, the stop button is no longer disabled. So right now, I'm sure that you can barely see that over video chat, but the stop button is gray and disabled. But then when I start running, the stop button switches to be dark. So there's 3 different visual indicators that code is running. And in the upper right here, there's a small thing that shows you when the evaluation started. And when it completes, it shows you the total amount of time that was spent evaluating. Also, if you put the mouse over the input prompt, it'll give you some additional information. For example, which kernel was used to evaluate that cell.
And if you evaluate multiple cells that queue up?
Yep. Is that what somebody's doing right here? Yeah, it queues up multiple cells. If you try to reevaluate an existing cell, it kills that one and restarts it. So yeah, so for example, if I evaluate these 4, then it does the first one, the others queue up. It does have an execution queue. The execution queue, and really everything related to execution, is entirely backend. So for example, I could start these 4 things running. I should put some output in so that you believe me. Print 2 plus 5, print 3 minus 7. So I'll start a couple of these things running, and then I'll kill this tab. So now I've started them running. I'm closing that tab. I mean, I could actually close the browser tab. I reopen the tab, and it continues executing. It really, oh, it's Python. So it stopped at this point, I think. Actually, no, that might be different. It doesn't stop when there is an exception, apparently. So I can't remember whether I carefully copied Jupyter in that regard or not.
It seems like it didn't implement that 2 plus 5.
Well, the problem is I switched to Python 3, Anaconda, and so...
Yeah, but if 2...
Oh.
Why wasn't there an error on 2 plus 5 if it was evaluated first?
Good question. Okay, let's just try this again. Oh, well, of course it's going to work now because I put the parentheses in. Intended execution model is order backend, and then the results are put in the front end. And evidently, if there's, I mean, I can understand now thinking about how it's implemented. If there's an exception, it just goes on to the next one and shows the exception. Is that how Jupyter works or not?
I don't know. I think it's just abort all the next computation if there is an exception.
Yeah,
I think that's right. The idea is if you're running your entire notebook, often cells depend on earlier cells, so in order to avoid a cascade of errors.
I don't think Jupyter has a notion of being able to run a given set of selected cells. You either run all cells above, or run all cells below.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think it's just with everything to ZMQ. When as soon as there's an error, you just flash the ZMQ queue. Yeah, so you can't abort a cell, or I would have to recheck it. I mean, it's often the execution semantic is often discussed in various contexts, and people want both behaviors. So
yeah, I saw a lot of discussion on the Jupyter issue tracker about this, about people wanting this behavior. I can see why it does this because, I mean, in the back end, it's just sort of parsing and processing messages and executing them one after the other. It doesn't really, currently the code that I'm running doesn't worry about whether or not there was an error. And in fact, it's kind of maybe difficult to decide whether there's an error for certain kernels, I suppose.
How does this interact with the collaborative part? So if you have multiple people submitting cells for execution.
So it'll just do them in the order that they're submitted. It'll queue them it just queues them up. I mean, all the client does is for each cell there's a JavaScript object, and when they request that a cell be executed, a flag gets set, or actually a field gets set, which is run true or something like that. I forget, like some state thing gets changed, and then this propagates to the backend. The backend notices there's one single thing listening on the backend, and it since it's kind of a single point, it decides in what order things run, etc. So if one person decides to execute a cell and then somebody else does, the appearance for both of them will be that both cells are running. I think if I just switch to screen sharing, I could show you this in 2 windows simultaneously. Though it's a little weird. My computer feels very slow because of using BlueJeans. Wow, there's a lot going on down here.
Is that you?
There's also the time travel that'll show the evolution of the document. And what's changed over time.
So you got all the display, apparently. Sorry, I'm not on the notebook, but I'm seeing as William scrolls down.
Yeah, you mean, yeah.
Yeah. You have updatable displays, the new feature that was added recently.
Updatable displays. I don't even know what that means. What is an up?
Frozen for you guys?
You can target a display with a display ID. It comes as a transient dict that comes alongside the data and metadata.
I definitely have not.
The front end doesn't support it. Yeah, I can see it's not supported here. That's great.
I mean, if you look at the, I guess the message spec or the document that explains the messaging, it is the documentation. It's very easy to see kind of what is necessary to write a kernel, but it's not so easy to see what you're supposed to implement in order to implement a client on the other side. So I mostly figured out what to implement by looking at notebooks and seeing what messages are common or appear. So it's a little tricky to know what every possible feature is. And then also I often looked at the source code of Jupyter, of the Jupyter client, to see what was actually supposed to happen.
Well, I can see a main thing you're going to hit with a bunch of different projects is all the ones that expect require is defined.
So
I just tried to use Plotly's iPlot.
Yeah, we did enable require and then decided to disable it for now at least, because it conflicts with Webpack. It conflicts with a lot of the packages that we load via Webpack, subtly breaking them left and right. And also, so for one thing, I mean, we know what our users are actually using in SMC right now, and they are obviously not using require based stuff very much. Maybe they are. I don't know. I mean, we look at what they're using. They're not using any extensions because we don't actually.
A bunch of projects actually run require as part of the HTML bundle that they output.
Yeah, I've seen that. Well, none of those will work. Definitely none of those will work because we don't have require.
At least for Plotly, they are exporting their content.
Right.
Or you have to take headphones off because of the echo. That's right. Okay. So there's at least one npm package you can use to do a conversion from a Plotly MIME type to a React element. I can point you to those ones.
Okay. Okay, I guess another thing to show you that's different than Jupyter. I mean, there's a bunch of little things that that I don't know, become painfully obvious to us after a couple of years because people repeatedly hit issues. So an extremely standard thing for people to do with a Jupyter notebook is to basically write while true print hello or something similar to that, produce an enormous amount of output, and then the document gets really large and then they can't open it, or it slows down their browser too much trying to open it. So that's a very common thing to do. So what I ended up doing in here is, watch, if I do while true hello, then what it does, oops, dang it, stupid Python 3. So what it'll do behind the scenes is it's running the code. It doesn't stop it. It's actually continually running and producing output. However, if you scroll down to the bottom of this output, you'll see that it says
fetch additional output. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it says fetch additional output. And there's some parameters that are configurable. What it does is on the back end, it's collecting the output. And when it exceeds a certain window, or it basically has a buffer on the back end, and when the output gets too big, it just throws away extra messages and keeps the most recent messages. Similarly, if there are very large messages and they can be truncated, for example, they're text, then it will truncate the message and push it. So when you click this fetch output button, it just gets the last few tens of thousands of output messages. But it's actually still running right now. And if I explicitly click stop, then it sends an interrupt signal, interrupts it. And it's easier if I toggle. Whoops.
Cool.
Nope, single click, sorry.
Are you identifying each cell with an ID?
Each cell has a UUID. It's actually I didn't use it. I'm not currently using a a full UUID because that's kind of overkill. I'm just using the first 6 characters of a UUID. And when the cell's created, I do check that that's unique. But it's in case you were to create 2 different cells on 2 different clients, when they merge together, at least they're highly likely to be distinct.
Okay, but I'm mostly curious because that was a good thing, like a back pressure there.
Yeah. There's a unique UUID. The underlying data structure that we're using for the notebook is a map. For the cells is a map from UUIDs to data about them. One of the things is the position of the cell, which is a floating point number, and that's what's used for ordering. So we're not keeping the cells as a list, we're keeping them as a map from UUIDs to data about the cell. And then when displaying, we order them. So for example, in our underlying data, if you move one cell up, all it does is switch the positions of the cells. It switches 2 numbers associated to the cells, their position. By the way, if I click the more output at the bottom, it will take a little while to render as much as it can. It gives a little message, some intermediate output was truncated, and how many messages were discarded, and then you get the rest of the messages. And at the very bottom, it also gives you another reminder of messages being discarded. If I click save, it does output everything to a normal IPyMB file, which is right here. And that file is 0.5 megabyte. It's pretty big because of this, the images and also this big amount of output.
So
Sure.
Nothing which is not feature parity, but something like that. But if you have extra data that you store in a separate file, which is not IPyMB,
yes.
And if you leave the kernel running and you have kernel restart and you have the execution time and so on and so forth, you can solve one of the problems we haven't solved yet, which is showing to users with a different color or different style or whatever, cells that have not yet been executed on this specific kernel.
Yes.
Because people tend to execute things out of order. With our implementation, we have an ambiguity of what a dirty notebook is because we don't know whether things, when you just load a notebook from a kernel which was already there, you can't tell whether a cell has been executed or not. And that has been a request from many users, like, can we have an indication of dirty cells?
Definitely, you definitely have it. for every cell, I know whether it was evaluated in this session, the exact time when it was evaluated, how long it took, etc. Let me, I'm just going to make another very clean notebook and then show you the underlying data structure in, just so you can see that. And I would be, I mean, it would be very easy, obviously, on top of this to implement what you described. I would be happy if you told me what UI you wanted rather than me just making up something. You know what I mean? So that when you do implement a solution to that problem, hey, look.
Yeah, I can dig up the previous discussion we had, and it was bike shedding hell.
Okay, great. Well, I can take it into account and then just do something. I mean, we do solve these problems with Sage Worksheets. We have a color indicator which shows whether or not a cell is executed in this session.
Yeah, that's what I would have done. Like basically, if you start executing something and you have both dirty cells and fresh cells, all the dirty cells become grayish, so that you know they've not been executed.
Yep. That's what's in Sage Worksheets. There's a blue line when it's in this session, and it's a gray line when it's from a previous session. Here's the underlying kind of format of the data, as I was saying. So there's the first 6 characters of a UUID, and then there's a map for outputs, which goes from strings, integer strings, to objects that describe the output. This is just used internally, and again, we export and import to the normal IPyMB format. There's also, for example, the start time of the calculation as milliseconds since the epoch, and the end time of the calculation, the kernel that was used, and if there was more than one output message, there would of course be more here. So, oh God, terrible at Python 3. So now you can see that there's output 0, and there should also be output 1 right here. Yep. There's also something, hopefully it works because I literally just rewrote it this morning. There's a raw mode or an IPyMB file mode. The name changed recently, but this is the underlying file for the IPython notebook, but it will change in real time if you make a change to the notebook. And if you change this, the notebook itself will also change, which is, so for example, if I change the output to 2, and then I switch back to the normal view, then it's 2 rather than 1. So
you can't trust what you've run anymore. Just kidding.
Well, true. You can't trust what you see. On the other hand, you can tell that I was the one who changed. I mean, it says that the edit that changed it from 1 to 2 was made by William Stein at this point in time. And the history is immutable, and you could imagine, you can just look and see why it changed and who did it.
Yeah, so derailing again to non-feature parity, one of the long thread we had a couple of years back was that if you have cells with UUID and a list of UUIDs that basically give you the order of the cells,
yes.
What you can also have is actually, instead of a list of UUID, have a graph of UUID, a DAG, and basically get more complex workflow where you can imagine having 2 different, like I'm doing this first initialization cells, and I either use this algorithm or this algorithm. It's not something we want to bake in IPyMB, but I know that a lot of people were interested in having things like that. UI is, I don't know what, but we got requests for things like that.
So one thing is, as I mentioned before, instead of a list of cells, I really have a mapping from UUIDs to cell data, and then a position field. Yeah. And right now the position is just, they're floating, real numbers, so it's just linearly ordered. But there's no reason that it could just be a partially ordered. I mean, these could be like pairs of numbers, and then you would have several cells, and then they're ordered, and then several more cells, and they're ordered, and so on. So I think that by keeping a position, I mean, it's equivalent, but it's a natural way of generalizing to something where they're not necessarily linearly ordered.
So do you update when you delete a cell, then you have to update the position of all the subsequent cells, or do you just leave a gap?
It just leaves a gap. If for some reason something crazy happens, which can happen because we allow offline editing and we merge changes together. And by the way, I think it's important to mention, in case you've used SMC before January, all of the synchronization and history and so on for these underlying objects, it's not done at the string level, it's really done at an object level. There's no possibility of corruption or anything like that, like there used to be until this year. So like when you change a particular field, it really does just change that one field properly. But what happens, the backend will periodically check whenever there's changes. And if two positions are identical, then it will renumber the positioning so that all positions are unique. Otherwise, like when you insert a cell, for example, I'll put a new cell between these two by typing A. So I just added a new cell. If I go down here and look at the positions, there's going to be a floating point value in there. So it's position 0.5.
So you just take the average of the two cells in between.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. But if if I did that enough that it suddenly, suddenly I got the average was just one of the numbers because of rounding errors or something ridiculous, then it would just relabel everything. So
yeah, no, yeah.
Sure. So that's what it does. Yeah, I implemented that for I used that same approach for the to-do list that we have in SMC, and it seemed pretty nice, so I just stuck with it. Let me see, I made a list in the chat of the things to run by people. So let me look if I missed anything. Simultaneous editing, undo and redo, time travel, the raw file edit mode, which I just showed you. So again, if you switch over, then you see underlying file. You can edit. This is an alternative way of editing metadata, for example. If you want to add metadata, you just edit it directly. And it'll show you an error until you make it correct, and then it's proper.
Presumably that's
hooked up to the real-time sync framework. So if I open a new tab in the notebook, then everything would be updated real time.
Yes, everything would be updated real time on either side in the undo. I think an important point when I show you this, again, I think I should switch to screen sharing rather than application sharing for a moment, because it's pretty cool. Okay, I'm switching to screen sharing. So now I can open the same document in two different windows. Sorry, an important point about the raw thing is you should imagine a future where we have a single CodeMirror editor for the entire notebook as an alternative way of viewing a Jupyter notebook. And I mean, that's something high on my list. It won't be in the first release, but this kind of illustrates a little bit of how that might feel, except obviously this is just editing the underlying data. So just hold on a second. It's also really fun because you can sit here and work with the notebook and then see how the underlying IPyMB file is evolving, which is just kind of, I don't know, when you're implementing a notebook, it's kind of nice to be able to do that. So for example, so see here, you see the source on the left over here, and like you want to add a comment, so I can do that right here. This is Python 3. And then if I stop for a second, notice that it appeared over here on the left-hand side. And then I can also edit it on the left-hand side. I can make that a capital T, and then it'll change on the right-hand side, like that. So it's really synchronized. And then also when you run things, so maybe I'll reevaluate this on the right-hand side. It's going to flicker on the left-hand side because for a moment it deletes everything as there's no output. And then it puts the outputs in, like that. It's kind of fun if you do like a for loop for I in range 10, print I time.sleep.
Parentheses.
Oh gosh, thank you. I'll do that in a second. I need a, yeah. So notice now you see the output messages as they're appearing in the raw document. I don't know. I feel like that's pretty fun.
Don't stream get concatenated in the document? But that's a detail. It's valid, but I think for
maybe that's important. This is produced by my.
You want to combine them and make sure to handle caricatures.
I mean, the backend kernel sends distinct messages, and then everything beyond that is up to the client, right? So if you guys concatenate them, I should change the exporter to do that. I think I didn't realize that.
We concatenate as an optimization on the front end.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to. I think it's fine if you don't. But
okay, I'm going to make a note of that.
Yeah, the other thing that I just realized is that OrCode mirror. It's a feature which is not really used a lot, but OrCode mirror allow multiple cursors at once.
So I did think about. Do you mean like, for example, notice right now I just made 4 cursors right here, and I
can't on mine.
You might have to switch to Sublime mode and then use the keyboard. The support's there, but the key bindings might not allow it easily unless you're in Sublime mode.
I might have been using the wrong.
But yeah, it's just the latest version of CodeMirror, I think, and but of course you can't do multiple cursors in multiple cells simultaneously.
No, I was just I don't know. I just had a key that was stuck, and it works. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see some other things. There's a search and replace. I really did go through all these things you have and tried to implement them. So here's the search and replace. I use the same, more or less the same icons, I think. But what I did slightly differently is I have it show the input below of the entire document, and then when you do a search, it highlights exactly what matches. Whereas your search and replace shows one line for every match, even if it's in the same line. So it's kind of different than most search and replaces that and I also have it. So when it does the replace, you can have it replace just the first match or replace all the matches.
Yeah, and our search and replace will be wrong. Won't work. Like the preview is wrong if search overlaps, because it's just a dumb loop that I never took a.
Yeah, I did. Since I literally just implemented search and replace like 2 days ago, I did think about exactly that issue of how to loop over and dealing with overlaps.
Yeah, and I know our implementation is wrong, so you don't need to match it perfectly. I know it's yeah.
So yeah, so I did little things like when you click this button, it changes the title to be a little more. I mean, this is a really bad example because there's nothing in the other cells, but put something down here. Okay, and then again, oops, edit, find and replace. Yeah, so it shows all the input, and then you say foo, and then it shows only the thing that matches. And you can say replace first, or you can replace. It'll show the number of matches, and if you click that, it replaces all of them. And you can adjust case sensitivity, and you can use a regular expression. And for for some of the actual regular expression code, and for the replacing there and the finding, I just used your code. I mean, I rewrote it in CoffeeScript, but I carefully wrote it.
Yeah, no, because I see there is some really edge case, like once you toggle the button, it focuses back the search fields that look really like behavior. So.
Yeah, so hopefully, that wasn't. Yeah, hopefully it feels similar. So like if you're here, I always made it refocus the find if you click one of the buttons. I don't know. Hopefully it's close enough. I mean, my goal is that people can switch back and forth and they don't feel like they're using something that's completely different. It's not like switching between Jupyter and Interact, which are very different. No offense to Kyle. Or Jupyter Lab even, which is a lot different. And then, okay, so then other things, let's see. I added some clarifications in the menu. So for example, when you're switching kernels, it's nice to just have some extra indication of what kernel you currently are using. So I just had that be highlighted in blue. And then similarly, for the cell toolbars, it shows which toolbar you currently have selected. So I think I made I made a bug report in the official Jupyter repo about the tagging toolbar because it had some funny aspects to it. I was just testing things like making a very large number of tags, and then it kind of broke really badly, the official one. So I made a report about that. it ends up the X's don't appear anymore, and things just kind of run off to the right. Maybe nobody tested that case or something. So let's see, so there's that, and then yeah, I did attachments as well. Except so attachments, you need a markdown cell. So I'll go above. So markdown, so foo. Actually, escape markdown. Okay, so you have a markdown cell, and then you can do edit, insert images. Except that we already have a React component for drag and drop, so we use that instead. But otherwise, it's I tried really hard to make everything, file format compatible and look the same. It centers it in the same way. I also looked. Oh crap! That looks the paragraph. Oh wow! I see. I wrote it inserted the image directly in the title, which is kind of funny. And I also I looked at your code for how you do the paragraph P that appears and the anchor links, and copy that exactly as well, because I wanted things to be really compatible. For delete attachments, you have the toolbar has like edit attachments, but the only thing you can do is delete attachments. So in this, I just call it delete attachments. And
if I remember correctly, if the attachment is not referenced, when you save the notebook, it's just automatically scrubbed.
I did see that when I was glancing through the source code, I noticed that there was garbage collection like that. I didn't implement that because I was a little unsure about it, but I think I should probably implement it.
The other thing you can do for delete attachment, especially if it's images, you might be able to add a hover on the image with a small trash can on one of the corner.
Ah, that's a good idea.
That would make the UI slightly more compact.
I could also do the image garbage. Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Okay, yeah, so I haven't implemented that, but I mean, it's the sort of thing that isn't going to hurt that it isn't implemented so much, but
no, I mean, it's things we could do also better in Jupyter. So it might be that we should do a better job at it.
Okay, let's see. Moving on. All this stuff is really straightforward. Sort of straightforward. Oh, I put in, this is just for fun, but I put in this object browser I found, which didn't work. That sucks. Oh, why isn't? Okay, it must be temporarily. I was just working on this code, so I must have just broken it.
No, and you also have some much better things that we have planned to do that we don't have. Like you have the shortcut in the menu that we still don't have.
Oh yeah, because I was just, so I have this command. I unified the shortcuts and the list of commands.
Yeah.
So I have one file that has a JavaScript object with all the command names, and I tried to name them the same as you have them named, like the underlying string that names the command, in case those are used in plugins or something. But yeah, see, you can search this, and then it shows you all the things that match, and then you can click on them to run the command, and it has the keyboard shortcuts listed. So I wanted, because you have like two different things. One is for keyboard shortcuts, and one is for list of commands, but they really kind of don't really need to be too different. And I was a little lazy, and I figured this wouldn't confuse people too much.
And if we were lazy, it was a question of time of merging both things together that we want to do as well. One thing that you might want to do, I don't know how much you've dived into CodeMirror, is in these things, try to pull out the shortcut from CodeMirror and show them even as non-editable.
Oh, right, yeah. We have a little bit, we have keyboard shortcuts here in our account settings, which is kind of a stupid place. Those are the CodeMirror keyboard shortcuts. But you're right, it would be really natural to add those. I forgot about that. Good point. Because you clearly have that, and they aren't commands that, Okay, CodeMirror keyboard shortcuts, some of which are kind of arbitrary.
I think they have also a key map thing, so you might be able to parse the key map and figure out exactly the same way as what you have now and show them. It's on the to-do list, not even open as an issue in Jupyter.
Yep. No, that's a really good idea. I just made a note of that. So feedback.
You say something about how you have code mirror HTML.
Oh, so yeah,
code mirrors. Yeah.
I ended up giving up on that temporarily. So for a while, for performance reasons, I had done a lot of work to try to implement something where the only cell that actually used CodeMirror was the live cell, and then any cell that wasn't focused would be static, just using the CodeMirror renderer. So CodeMirror has this thing where it'll run through some text and it'll output tokens and tell you how to kind of render it. And so I took that function and then had it directly generate React stuff. So it doesn't actually generate any HTML at all. And that is in fact used for our public notebook viewer. So if I were to view one of these, well, suffice it to say there's a different renderer for notebooks, which is like NB viewer, but it's entirely client side. And it uses CodeMirror's static rendering mode via React. I turned that off though because I wanted to get line numbers and a million other things to work, and I was spending a really long amount of time re-implementing line numbers, which I was pretty happy with, and then I wanted word wrap to work, and I just figured I should put that off until another time. So basically, Jason, I gave up on that, just like everybody does.
just like we did.
Exactly like you did. So that's
just little small UI issue that might be confusing for users. If you click on the file menu, especially on Mac because you don't have the scroll bar, yes. You may not realize that you can scroll it and see what's after, because like you have a mouse and you see the scroll bar. But on my computer, I don't see that I have all the like it's stopped at download as RST.
There's a default setting on Mac which is don't show scroll bar unless you're scrolling, and I have it set to always show scroll bar, but most people don't because the default is to not do that. I totally agree. It's confusing the way the menus work with.
So if the menu is scroll, if you could have, I don't know how it's implemented right now, if you could have either a CSS properties or a ... that show that there is something else. Otherwise, users might miss that the menu is scrollable.
Menu scrollability shows something. Okay, I'm making a note of that. I worried about it, and I will worry about that again in the future. I agree that it's pretty weird and annoying. Like, yeah, I mean, the natural thing would be like a little arrow down at the bottom or something like that.
Yeah.
And the reason, of course, it's a problem is because I don't have nested menus like you guys have. Yeah. So, for example, instead of kernel pulling up another submenu, it's just all in one menu.
And it's honestly it's great with a trackpad. I haven't tried with a mouse, but I think I prefer the non-nested menu as nested menu.
Let's see what else. I'm looking again at the list. Okay, I think I've basically talked about everything. There's an about page, which is similar. It gives information about the server, but the server is just a single Node.js process using spawn interact. I mean, it's actually for all the different kernels running, and in fact, for the entire kind of back end of a project, it's all one process running under Node.js. And this just says something about that. And there's some text in there that tries to talk about the relationship between what I've written here and, I mean, I want to make it very clear that this isn't something that the official Jupyter project produced. So I write, it's a complete open source rewrite by SageMath Inc. of the Jupyter notebook. So, you know, users won't be confused in that regard. But if you want me to change the wording in some way, let me know.
I don't think it's going to be any of us that says anything.
Well, the steering committee has some like cease and desist letters.
Well, you know,
first experience with that.
The steering committee is here.
Okay, good.
So I should say I've kept quiet because of the echo. This is super incredible to see. It's awesome.
Thanks.
I agree. It's
We should just replace the current Jupyter with this.
we could.
Yes. What's how easy is it for someone else to take your open source Jupyter notebook? I mean, it's not just a React component. You've got a whole bunch of infrastructure built around this.
So
React
the new,
feature.
I mean, just the new code to implement this, not counting all the stuff that it, depends on, is like 10,000 lines of code probably. I mean, not surprisingly, the Jupyter Notebook's a pretty mature, web application that you guys have been working on for like 6 years at least, and there's lots of people. So it's pretty deep. There's a lot there. So it's just been a lot of work slogging through the amount that I slogged through. And of course, I missed a lot of things, I'm sure, that will come to light. But
I'm pretty kidding about replacing it in pieces. There's a part of me that's like serious. Then the other reality, which is that people are expecting a bunch of legacy stuff in terms of our configuration.
yeah, like this doesn't support extensions because it's not jQuery, basically.
And it shouldn't, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the only way to move forward too is to just say, not supporting this, and then you just build it into your platform.
I would say, I mean, my hope for the Jupyter, steering committee and project or whatever is just to really embrace the idea of there being many different clients. And just like you have lots of kernels, that's a massive strength of, maybe I'm going to switch out of my screen sharing. Because that's, I don't know, maybe that's my main political point would be to say that one of the massive strengths of their project is, how do I get out of screen sharing? Stop sharing. So one of the big strengths of their project is all the kernels, and it's pretty well documented how to write a kernel. It would be cool if the documentation around writing a client was sort of, if it was really encouraged to write alternative clients and similarly well documented. And, like the website listed different Jupyter clients, like Interact and CoCalc Jupyter Notebook and the one that you have and so on. And then Jupyter Lab is yet another one. Anyways, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's really good having lots of clients, right? I mean, I hope.
Yes.
No, so it's one of the reasons. So I was looking at the Jupyter Scala. So he did a presentation, and he said the reason that he didn't put more effort into Zeppelin was that he liked that there were multiple front ends, right? Is that people can work in hydrogen or whatever. And so for him, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can just work on the kernel. Other people are working on the front ends. I just have to make a really good experience for my language. And then, yeah. So I think it's really good.
It would be really cool to know, to somehow document better as part of the official documentation, what a front end client should expect to be able to render. And you know what I mean?
So
okay.
We wrote some alternative docs for front end development in Interact's docs.
That makes sense.
I'll probably just turn them into blog posts, but they could just end up in Jupyter Client.
Yeah, I mean, even
more about a decision just to do it.
Even some links, like you Google for Jupyter message protocol, and you very easily find a very readable and nicely short, really, document, and it does make a lot of sense. It's clearly been polished pretty well because people who write kernels have to understand it. But then when you want to know what to do with messages, you end up basically having to look at the source code of the Jupyter Notebook a lot just to see how.
Yeah, and you end up referencing. You have to reference Jupyter Client and NB format.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's the key thing, is that there's not like a guide to writing a notebook.
And it would be nice just to have like a to-do list. Implement something that can display these messages, etc. And then maybe I don't know. I'm just having just spent 2 months being on the side of implementing things, and you've done that for like years with Interact. You can tell how that would be useful.
It's only been about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Huh.
There's a lot.
But I mean, you must. How did you figure out what
implementation depends?
Kyle, how did you figure out what to implement regarding messages? Like,
I don't know. We got things connected. I mean, I knew the format well enough that it was more like, yeah. I would slowly, like we just made an issue for each additional message we weren't supporting, and otherwise we would just drop them. Like right now, we don't do anything with history.
right.
There's like no UI for us to expose. It's like not worth it for us to go after it. Only recently did we add introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did do that stuff, by the way.
We only looked at what the basics would be to do execution. Like you really only need, I mean, no matter what, all front ends have to support the kernel info, or like they should make a kernel info request at the start. And then just the execute input, and then all the different types of output that can come back.
Yeah, that would be the most important thing to document, I think, is the list of all the different types of output. Like there's the output that asks for, well, there's a lot of different outputs that you kind of discover.
Speaking of inspection, Shift Tab doesn't do anything.
What is Shift Tab supposed to do?
Shift Tab pop up a small pop-up that gives you information of the previous token.
Okay.
The equivalent of
it's the introspection. I think it's like the object inspect. I don't remember what
I had never heard of
inspect request.
Shift Tab. Okay, well, anyways, I'll try it out. I didn't know there was a Shift Tab, so it just does nothing. That's why it's not implemented. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just I guess in Sage Notebook we had tab, and in IPython command line there was tab a long time ago, and I didn't know what
tab. There's tab and Shift Tab. There's tab and Shift Tab.
Right.
Did you implement the question mark and double question mark?
So that's in the kernel.
I'm guessing Shift Tab is unindent. I actually have it bound to unindent, I think. So that could cause
I think it's bound to unindent, but only if there is selection. If there is no selection, it basically do something equivalent of question mark and show it next to the cursor of the user. I can share my screen and show you if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So in it's unindent in mine, but that's because I haven't implemented anything else. I see. I can figure it out because I'll just.
I can just show it to you quickly because it might not be obvious. Do you see my screen?
No, I see you. And then my wife is suddenly bugging me very aggressively.
You have to open Blue Jeans again. I can see your screen, Matthias.
Okay. But if William doesn't see.
Oh, I see. I just have to full screen it. Okay, I will do that. Yep, I see it. Okay, got it. I am now looking.
Super slow.
Yeah, because
if I do matplotlib Shift Tab, it will show me a small section thing.
Oh, cool.
If I press a second time, it expands it and make it scrollable.
Nice.
If I press it 3 times, it make it sticky, so I can keep typing and it won't dismiss.
Yeah, I have to admit, as far as I knew, the only way to get any of this information was to type a question mark or a double question mark and hit Shift Enter, evaluate it, and then suddenly have something pop up in the bottom, which seemed like an incredibly bad UI. Okay, it's Shift Tab, great.
So yes, so you inspect. The way it works, you can change it. Yeah. The first time it shows a small thing. The second time it expands. The fourth time it makes it sticky for 10 seconds, and the fourth time it just sends what it shows to the bottom so that it's permanently sticky.
Okay, wow. All right, I had no clue. I'm really glad you mentioned that because
it's
yeah.
I had no clue you could press it twice or 3 times or 4 times.
And it's configurable. You can press it as many times as you want, and you can add any action you want. But it's probably too much for. for SMC. Like most people press it only one time, and it also works when you make a selection. I won't show it, but if you there is a way to do it. I don't remember the exact semantic, but you can select something and press Shift Tab. If the selection doesn't have a new line, Shift Tab will make the query on the selection. If the selection has a new line in it, it will indent, dedent.
And dedent, I see. Okay, I'll try to. Oh, yep. Thanks.
I add a note. I will try to open an issue with a better description.
Okay. That was pretty good. Okay, anything else?
Not as far as I can tell. I mean, there are small things, but I can write to you about that. Yeah. Like for example, the command palette is nice, but you can't select an action with the keyboard, which I think most people want to do.
Oh, did I not do that yet? I mean,
yeah.
like the mouse. Yeah, that's right. I don't remember implementing that at all. Yeah, you have to type the whole thing in until it's a unique search, and even then it does nothing. Yeah, you're right. It's ironic that something involving the keyboard can't be used with the keyboard.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have a few other things that we don't need to do by video now.
Right. Okay. Doesn't actually let you use. Cool. Excellent. So yeah, email me. Thanks everybody for the feedback. Hopefully this can be a really compatible. What?
When's your launch?
Our plan is to launch the first version this weekend. I think it's good enough to replace what we currently host. Given that extensions there's no way to use extensions right now with the notebook as we host it, for example, because of the order in which things get started up in the environment and so on. So people aren't using them, therefore they're not going to complain about the lack of them beyond the complaints they're already giving us. So we don't have to worry about extensions too much. I think that a lot of these subtle usability issues we talked about, I mean, I still have a couple of days, but the plan is to make it live this weekend. I think it's
awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there a specific branch I should look at?
You mean on GitHub?
Yeah, on GitHub.
So yes, it's called Jupyter 2. That's the branch to look at.
Jupyter 2.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
You might want to have you have a really nice JSON view of the notebook. You might want to make it YAML for it to be easier to edit.
That's a good idea. You're right. You could totally edit a YAML version. That's yeah. I could have
Is it?
I mean, I should add that as
Jupyter
another.
2? Or Jupyter 2?
No, it's definitely not. Just Jupyter 2. And let me in the chat I posted links to the code, but you have to kind of drill down to get to the code. But I guess if you look at this, you look at the commits, and then you'll quickly find the code. So yeah, go to the Jupyter 2 branch and then look at commits, and then start looking around. But basically, there are 2 directories called Jupyter, and in those you'll find all the new code that's relevant to this. There's SMC web app /Jupyter and SMC project /Jupyter. The SMC project /Jupyter is the one that uses Spawn Interact, it's the backend part, and the SMC web app Jupyter is all the React stuff and Redux.
Cool. Oh, are you using immutable or plain objects?
Immutable is used extensively in the code.
Okay.
I mean, there's a little tiny bit of all the Redux store stuff is done as an immutable JS object. So, in short, immutable.
Okay. I've been thinking about breaking away from immutable. And so that's why I was curious if you had also broken away or if you were still using it. So good to know.
There are certain problems where immutable JS is incredibly powerful and useful in my experience. Like the real-time synchronization of a distributed object basically is, I implemented that using just normal objects, and then I re-implemented it using immutable, and it was much, much better. So easier to do certain things. But I mean, there's also competitors to immutable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I looked at some of those too. They seem to be moving along. It's just it stagnated, and I cared about the flow definitions because now that we're heavily typed with flow, and I just wanted the immutable definitions to get better, especially because they're like records alone. I wanted to have full typing for.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was using plain objects, then I'd have them typed, and then I just wanted to use frozen objects at that point. But yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Cool. So I don't have anything else to say. But again, thanks for all the feedback. It's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll probably dig through. Safi and I were gonna work this summer on RealTime for Interact and kind of splitting out more of the web UI bits. It looks like we should definitely pay attention to what you've already done here. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of answers to questions. A particular choice of color of bike shed has been chosen.
Yep.
As far as
you have to make an opinion on these.
Yeah. But it's pretty nice. So.
Sweet.
Yeah. I mean, you really need like a foundation. Well, anyways, yeah. Real-time distributed. I mean, real-time synchronization is definitely quite the can of worms. It's really, really subtle, as I can tell. Okay, cool. So yeah, thanks everybody again, and I'll talk to you later.